What's up, everyone? I'm Dave Schools, founder of Entrepreneur's Handbook, welcoming you to episode 2 of the Entrepreneur's Handbook show with a super awesome person, Sarah Downey, venture capitalist at Accomplice. She's an angel investor, and she's also a founder of a lifestyle company app that's in stealth that we talked about in this episode. Enjoy the episode 2 of Entrepreneur's Handbook featuring Sarah Downey. Sarah Downey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. I'm happy to be here.
How you doing?
I'm good. I was just telling you before we started recording that I haven't had caffeine in 3 days, so I have this matcha here, and I'm about to get lit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm super pumped for all that we have to dig into today. And but first, I thought it'd be interesting if we started with how you and I first connected through Medium. That's how we kind of got to know each other. And so I'm curious how you discovered Medium and what you liked about the platform. What are your thoughts on Medium?
Yeah, well, I've been a Twitter user for a long time, and that is a love-hate relationship. But I mean, I started using a pseudonym maybe like 13 years ago, but then I started a real account for my actual self like 12 years ago. And I remember the same team that built Twitter launched Medium. And, you know, one of the frustrations about Twitter is that the medium is such that you can't express yourself fully. I mean, that is both the attraction and the downside of it. So I remember when they launched a longer form platform, I was like, oh, this is cool. You know, like I like to write and I like to create, but I don't like the distribution part and I don't like the discovery part. Like I have experience as a marketer, but I really don't like it. I just like to create. So I liked the concept that Medium was putting forth that, like, you know, you can focus on being a creator. There's a very clean interface. I also found that it was giving me really good content recommendations. Like that's how I found out about you. Like I remember reading a bunch of your stuff and hearing you in interviews and just thinking like, this guy knows his shit. So I think the discovery engine's really good. Agreed.
Yeah, well, with Medium, I was just chomping at the bit when they first opened the doors to let anybody write on the platform. This was like 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I could pop open the editor and start writing, I fell in love. I think it's the best place to write on the internet.
I agree. It's just like the best. You don't get that blank page syndrome for whatever reason. Like there's little design elements in its simplicity that make words come out of me for some reason. So it's interesting that you feel the same way.
What's your writing process? Like when you get an idea, how does that idea come out to being published?
Oh man. I usually like to do a general outline. So usually when I write, and by the way, side note, I've been working on this app. And so I've written like 800 pages of content for that. So I haven't really been publishing publicly in the meantime because all of my writing energy is going into that. But generally what I do is I know where I want to end up and I know what I generally want to say along the way. So I tend to make like bullets and then I just go from the top to the bottom and I expand the bullets. And then I read it through top to bottom again for flow, and then I'm kind of done.
Right on.
And I need a full keyboard. That's an important thing. Actually, let me show you. This is my mechanical keyboard. Yeah, I love it.
The colors.
I know. I like blue and green, but it's kind of like if you're typing all day and that's your instrument, you should upgrade it, you know? So it's like, it has good tactile feeling. And I feel like I'm smarter when I'm using a full keyboard, especially a mechanical keyboard where like, I don't have to pound down the letter for the keyboard to recognize that I'm doing it.
Developer of you, coders, like the old school keyboards where it makes a click and more
I love that. It sounds like a Wall Street trading floor in the 80s in here when I'm like really going.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Enneagram, and that's something I wanted to chat with you on. On your LinkedIn, it says that you're working on a stealth company, a stealth lifestyle company. So I'm curious what that means. What are you working on?
Yeah. So we're pretty close to launching an app. So I can't, I wish I could tell you like full details, but I built this with 3 of my very close friends. And the reason why it's a lifestyle app is we're not raising any money by design. Like we've all worked in tech startups or invested in tech startups. And, you know, that's a world that we know a lot about. And there are pros and cons to that world. So I feel like to have the ultimate amount of personal control over a project, you don't raise money. So we're doing that by design. It's just the 4 of us. We've done it with basically no money. But there's a personality test and about 800 pages of content and very personalized recommendations around this personality model called the Enneagram, which if people aren't familiar with, it's essentially, so I think a lot of people know about Myers-Briggs. You know, you have the 4 letters, you know, your ear and eye, et cetera. I'm an INTJ in the Myers-Briggs. I think that fits, but I didn't really find that to be like life-changing or particularly useful. However, I was working at a startup with my friend Isabella in like 2014, and she introduced this model called the Enneagram to our entire team at that point, and it was like a game changer. Like it changed the language that we use to communicate with each other. It changed the way we related to each other for the better. Essentially, there are 9 types in this model. The numbers 1 through 9. And everyone has a base personality type of one of those numbers. And then you have a wing to either side of it. So like I am an 8 with a 9 wing. So think of it as like the 8 is the main course of your personality and the 9 is the side dish. But the way that the model works is it says that everyone has a core fear and then a core desire resulting from that fear. And if you're unaware of how that is driving you, you're sort of in a box and controlled by it. Like it's a built-in blind spot and a driver that changes the way that you view the world. And, you know, all personality models bring something to the table. Every person is incredibly complex and nothing can completely nail anybody. But I have found that this model is scarily, like shockingly accurate when you find your type and subtype combination. Like I remember reading it and thinking it is incredible that this book knows this much about like the depths of my soul.
I'm actually really familiar with the Enneagram. I'm a 3 wing 4. And that's
so you're the professional.
Well, yeah, an achiever wing individualist or like hopeless romantic or whatever.
It's so, you know, I just was in New York City with one of my best friends from high school and he is the same type. And we had like a long conversation about what that means, how that's manifested for him. I mean, so 3s are the most common type as far as like high level CEOs, especially like public companies.
Yeah, entrepreneurs.
Yep. Like Oprah. Oprah is a definite, like I would put all my money on the fact that she is a 3 with a 4 wing. It's like achievement, efficiency, like they love to not waste their time. It's like, I have a plan. I want to be onward and upward. Like, let's be improving. Don't like when people cancel on them, waste their time, aren't efficient, kind of waffling. So 8s and 3s actually have that in common. Like,
I was going to mention that.
Action oriented.
What's really interesting between 3s and 8s, they get confused often because they can look the same, but 3s are driven, from what I've read in the Enneagram Institute, are driven more by like what people think, how they're perceived. Where 8s, it's more driven by something kind of intrinsically or like a truth that they believe so strongly that they don't care what people think and they're going to disagree.
Yes. You know, it's funny that you say that because my life for the last several months has been, so 2 of my co-founders are data scientists and we are really focused in on that problem that you just mentioned, which is like, there are a lot of tests out there for the Enneagram and we don't think they're particularly accurate. And one of the biggest problems is these mistypings. So you have types that kind of the behavior of the type looks similar, but the intrinsic motivation is different. And so we've been working really hard to surface like what are the specific questions that delineate types like 3s and 8s that often get mistyped. And you're absolutely right that there is a different locus of motivation for threes and eights. So for threes, it tends to be externally located. So, very motivated by, let's say, like a promotion that's very visible, a salary increase, a boost in follower count, some sort of accolade, award, etc. Like we live in a very three-centric culture, I think, in America, and it's actually very good to be a three in this culture because the whole thing is sort of designed to feed into that. And whereas eights, like we're very action oriented as well, but we lack the polish. That's one of the biggest ways you can see the difference. So like I would bet anything that Elon Musk is an 8 with a 9 wing, which is what I am as well. So it's like, very action oriented, want to see the immediate impact of their work, but like kind of don't give a shit what people think, which can be a good and a bad thing. Threes would be the kind of person who could go to a cocktail party and like flip it on and make friends with every single person in the party.
The threes are the chameleons, right? And that could be a strength because you can empathize, like genuinely empathize with the people in the room, with anybody, and like learn from anybody as a three. Where eights,
you can present your message in a way where people will hear it. Whereas with eights, I tend to have kind of one way of presenting a message, and it's like my way. And if you don't like it, I don't care. So it's like, I don't really have, like the primary emotion of the 8 is anger and the primary emotion of the 3 is shame. Although threes are out of touch with that emotion, which is kind of a varsity level thing. But I don't really feel shame. I kind of just do what I want. Right. But I get very angry. Like I open up Twitter and every day I see red like dozens of times a day, which is another way to differentiate those two. So.
I love your Twitter.
Thank you.
The way. Your unabashed opinions need to be heard.
You know what's funny though is like they are abashed. Like what I'm sure that people think that I'm very uncensored, and I am totally censoring.
We're only seeing the surface. We're just seeing the top 3%.
Oh yeah, that's why I'm wearing this shirt. Because I'm total thought criminal. Like I wouldn't survive in the 1984 universe for a minute.
Okay, so this Enneagram tool that you're working on, someone uses it. What's the outcome? How does it impact their life? So the app, we're making it mostly free. I mean, like hundreds of pages of content for free, because if you want to get into this system, it's a great system, but it's like giant stacks of books, kind of outdated websites, sort of crappy looking apps. There's some great people, great practitioners. I mean, a lot of that information is amazing. We just felt like it wasn't packaged and presented in a way that's really modern and usable for somebody in 2021. So the flow is download the app. It'll be iOS only to start. You take the test. So we have separate tests for type, wing, and instinct, which I don't know if you've gotten into that yet, but that's probably a level of detail we don't need to get into here. But you can take this isn't the Enneagram podcast. Yeah, unfortunately, because I could talk about this forever, but yeah, you get your results. The test is very dynamic and predictive. So as you're going, it will start zeroing in on what it thinks you are, cluster you around a certain type, change the questions. So for example, if it thinks it's stuck between two types, we have very specific questions to pull those apart. So you get your results. You have tons of information like fears, motivation, what you're best at, what you need to work on, every growth levels, for example, with red flags to show you, all right, maybe I'm starting to slip in my sort of overall level of health because I'm starting to have these thoughts and behaviors that are generally an indicator that things are not going well or that things are going better. You also we have thousands of tips. So you have a homepage, and every day or every time you refresh, you get a personalized tip based on you being a 3 with a 4 wing, and then we have, I think the most cool thing that we have is this compare section. So it's like a wheel where on one side you have one type and on the other you have another, and then you can compare in an incredibly detailed way across romance, work, friends and family, personal. So everything from let's say
you and I as an 8 and a 3, let's say we went on a date. How would I tend to act in that first date, and how would you act? What are the pet peeves that we would both be focused on? What are the things that we would love to hear the other person say or not want the other person to say? And so that I think is like the game changer that no one's
super
done.
interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I think so.
Party Cues is my conversation starter app. It's just a questions app, and it gets used on dates a lot. And Enneagram is a category on it. It's 50 questions about the Enneagram. You should check. Yeah, you should check it out.
That's cool.
You'd probably find it interesting.
The Enneagram is actually like, it's really taken off in a way that's surprising even to me. Like, I learned that the CIA uses it. Like for example, every employee at Shopify apparently uses this. Like Toby is also an 8 and he loves it. And like everyone at this company knows each other's number, and it's just a thing that everybody uses to communicate.
Huge tool for relationships and marriages. My brother he's a CPA, very logical, kind of like, I don't want to say cold, but smart, heady.
Is he a 5 or a 6?
Well, he found out that he took the test, found out, did some reading, and then found out he was a 6. And the 6,
hell yeah, like
protects what they know, and it's like a castle. And the Enneagram Institute gave the metaphor of a castle that he doesn't change his opinions.
He's the defender then, right? So he's a 6 with a 5 wing.
Exactly. Yeah. And but you'll have like a clash or a debate, and then he'll go away and think about it, digest, and then bring whatever truth he learned from that conversation into the castle and lock it back up and then defend it till the end.
Oh yeah. I have several very good friends who are that type, and that's a very good metaphor for that. And it's just nice to know. It's good to know that about yourself. Like we all are operating on these ingrained tendencies that we would all benefit from airing and knowing about. Like for me, my hair trigger is I hate to be controlled or told what to do, especially if I think it's harmful or restrictive. So, like I know that I have a hair trigger around free speech, for example. Like I'm like a canary in a coal mine. If I think someone's telling me you can't do that, you can't say that, I hate that. So I know that on one hand, I know that I overreact, but on the other, I know that I'm very well situated to pick up on things that infringe on that right that other people won't notice until it's too late. So it's kind of like a balance.
What's your thought process on kind of like censoring yourself? It sounds like you don't, but then again, you could say some things that powerful people don't like, and then you find yourself in hot water as a result of something you've said. How do you balance that?
It's such a hard problem. I mean, like one of the reasons that I ended up where I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, right? Because I've worked at startups. I am an angel investor. I'm a venture investor, and I'm a founder of this Enneagram thing. And I have like a wide variety of interests, and I go deep in several things. But the way that all of this started was back in the day, like I want to say like 2007, I started a podcast under a pseudonym, and long story short, but I got a stalker from that. And I ended up having to kind of reverse engineer how this person found me. And I got really into online privacy because of that. And I had just graduated law school. I was like extremely in debt, didn't want to practice law, really rock bottom period. And I decided to just like go into a Barnes and Noble, get on the Wi-Fi and look at Craigslist, and I decided to look at Boston. And I found this posting for this online privacy startup, ended up getting the job, like started their blog from nothing and made it successful. And then ended up, the investor there is now my partner at Accomplice. So like that moment changed my entire life. And it was, it had to do with censorship in the sense that I thought I was censoring enough using a pseudonym, and I wasn't, right? And I had for a long time this kind of like pseudonymous side where I would say more of what I was really thinking, and then I had the real account where I wouldn't. And then it became sort of like I've had periods of ups and downs in my life where usually depending on how secure I feel in my career, I'll say more or less of what I'm thinking. But the past couple of years, I've really worked hard on trying to make myself as cancel proof as possible so that I can say, 75% of what I want to say. I still think because of the people and companies that I'm associated with, like I care less about myself than I do about them. So my thought process is like, I don't care if I get thrown under the bus to some degree, but I don't want people associated with me to suffer because I said something too harshly or I didn't think through an opinion. Like I used to think, if this thing I say was on the cover of the front page of the New York Times with no context, how would I feel about that? But now in the last couple of years, I've come to really not like the New York Times. They used to be my sort of metric for really good reporting, and now they're definitely not. So I would have to replace a new publication there. But it's kind of like, if you can say this thing out of context and stick with it and feel good about it, that's kind of my metric.
Your rise from kind of being, I think I saw you were a director of community as where you started, and then you became a VC. I'm curious, when you make that jump, I had a question about how it works as a VC. Like, and I read that you weren't like an accredited investor. You're not coming from tens and hundreds of millions of dollars.
I'm still not, by the way. Like there's a loophole in venture capital where if you work for a firm, you're able to make investments. But like me personally, I don't make the amount of money that you would have to make. Like I get, I've made like 40 angel investments at this point, and some of them have just started to pay off, but it's a very risky game and it's a very long time horizon. So like, I think that I'll get to that point, but I'm in no way, I'm not doing badly, but I'm not like Jeff Bezos or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you became a VC and you're making these investments, do you get carried interest or like a management fee, or is it just a typical salary job and you're just doing the research and making good investments?
So it's both. It's the typical way that you get paid as a venture capitalist is there's two ways. You have a salary. You also get carried interest. And depending on the fund, you often have to pay into the fund itself. So like you are an investor, and you also get carried interest. And carried interest is kind of a complex thing. A lot of people don't know what it means, but think about it like if you work at a startup, you get salary and then you usually get equity. And equity is like the option to buy into stock in the company, right? And a VC firm is not like that. Usually it's a partnership, so they don't have equity per se. So instead what they do is they give what's called carried interest, which is basically a percentage profit share. So let's say you have a $200 million fund. You invest that $200 million, and as soon as the money starts coming back in from your investments, the first group who gets paid back are your investors. So your investors in a VC firm are called your LPs, and your LPs tend to be, let's say, big university endowments, other funds, other family offices, sort of like these big institutional investors who have venture capital as a tiny subset of what they do. And that's like the crazy risky part of what they do. So that $200 million comes in. Every one of those dollars that comes back goes to them. Then once they're paid off, we start to make money, and we make a percentage based on top of that. So it'll be like, all right, the next dollar that comes in over that 200 million, if I have 1% carry, I get $1 of that. So it's kind of like the fund as a whole needs to be successful, and then we all share in the profits depending on our carried interest percentage. But it is a team sport. Like I could have nothing but shitty investments, but if my partners have amazing ones, the fund is still an 8x, and then I'm kind of getting off well from that. So
yeah, do you prefer VC investing or angel investing?
Angel investing, definitely.
And why is that?
Well, VC, it's almost like there are different types of people for early and late stage investing, I have found. Early stage investing is like the earliest of those stages is you have a couple people in a garage with an idea and very little or nothing built. And at that stage, it's very messy. It's very idea driven, highly risky. There's a lot of personal psychology that goes into it, because fundamentally the most important thing are the people. So you're looking at, what are they hard workers? What are they motivated by? How do they interact with each other? That's what I like. Like, as you can see, I have this interest in psychology and kind of like messy rawness to the way that I operate. That's what I like. So almost ironically, the more successful that a company is, the bigger it gets, the more professional and buttoned up it gets, kind of like the less interested I am. So it's like, we have an interesting model at Accomplice where we have people who are kind of better at the earlier stuff and people who are better at the later stuff. And we work together and almost hand things off so that, because like once I'm on a company where the board is gigantic and it's very solemn and, very spreadsheety, it's just like not my thing. So angel investing tends to be much more the risky, like people and ideas, and just take a flyer on this stuff. That's why I like it more.
I'm gonna have to take that term, spreadsheety.
Yeah.
For describing the transition between early stage to late stage. It gets spreadsheety. And
the people get kind of spreadsheety too. I mean, like, I don't make sense in a growth capital situation. Like, I'm, I dress like this all the time. I don't have a blue blazer. There's a certain kind of person who is they're a little bit less pro risk, I think. And what they do is amazing. I can't do it. It's just I like to take those risks, and I like to be in with the people very early when things are kind of a mess. Yeah.
So you have like 2.5 jobs, right? Like
I have 3 jobs.
3 jobs. What does your day look like? Time management, like how do you keep it all straight and not just feel like a ball of chaos for 24 hours?
I do feel like a ball of chaos often. So there's that. So here's my cat, first of all. He helps. Like, he's a good stress relief. His name is Mr. Polar Bear. He's always here. Yeah, I'm basically Dr. Evil with this cat in my lap all the time. But
I'm also known at Hoppin as a cat person. They're typically on my couch in the back or in my lap.
I wish I could meet them.
Could open the door.
They seem they're very important. They have a lot of busy stuff to do, but I don't know. Like, I need to get better at it, but it's just constant switching. I think I usually try to prioritize the thing that has the biggest cognitive load. So if I'm writing a lot of content for the Enneagram, or I'm like testing data for different questions that we're doing for the app, I try to do that first. Then if I get brain dead and hit a wall, I work out. That's kind of like how I stay sane. And then, I have different colors for my calendars. So each of those 3 things has a different color. And I would say the angel investing is usually the most kind of flexible, because it'll be, we're talking to a company and we usually make decisions really quickly. My partner and I, because we co-run a fund for angel investing. So, and that can be, that's pretty flexible. Then the companies that I work with at Accomplice, it's like, board meetings, those are typically scheduled way in advance. Catch-ups with founders, also scheduled in advance. But I like to have a relationship with the founders I work with where they can just text me and it can be sort of off the cuff. And then for the Enneagram, my co-founders and I, we have recurring meetings, and we're also pretty flex. I mean, it's like I've kind of engineered my life purposefully to be pretty flexible so that I do a lot of work. But if I feel like doing it at 3 a.m. or, taking a day completely off to just play video games because I need to do that, then I can do that.
Which video game are you playing these days?
Oh, well, funny that you ask. So hopefully you can see this. So you see how I have 2 TVs on top of each other?
Mm-hmm. That's an epic setup.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've optimized for productivity, as you can see. The bottom one is a game called Hades that I've been playing on Switch that is fucking epic. It's like a roguelike. So you're basically trying to escape from hell, and every time that you do a run to do that, you're making different choices, and it's extremely fast paced and very kind of like decision based. And then the top one is Borderlands 3, which is a first-person shooter that I'm playing on PS5, and I love that franchise. And I also play Pokemon Go to a disgusting degree still, and have put way too much money into that game. Like, if you're wondering who's still paying Pokemon Go, it's actually a lot of people. I mean, they make billions. Like, they've made, I think hundreds of millions a year still. But I'm definitely one of those people.
The last game I was into was over in London at a gaming cafe when I visited Johnny when Hoppin was getting stood up in 2019. And we played Mordhau, which is like this online medieval slasher game. And a fun fact about Johnny is that he's actually one of the most talented gamers I've ever met, and plays Counter-Strike. He was like globally ranked with Counter-Strike.
That is no joke. I have a lot of respect for those people because it's like intense amounts of practice, hand-eye coordination. You got to know those maps in and out. Yeah. I'm not like, I was never good at Counter-Strike. I'm more of like a Halo Borderlands kind of person where it's a little bit cartoony and you have like a comically large overshield and it's a little bit more forgiving. Like you pop your head up and you don't immediately just get your head blown off. It's kind of more my style. Yeah.
So this is Entrepreneur's Handbook. So I have to ask you a question that has a practical takeaway and application for entrepreneurs getting started.
Cool.
One of the questions that I love talking about and wrestle with, especially at the early stage, so you're the perfect person to ask, is the question, how do you turn an idea into income? There's all sorts of different directions you can take that, but we get business ideas all the time, right?
Yeah.
But how does that actually turn into cash or numbers in your bank account? That's connecting those two dots is pretty much why this publication exists.
Yes. I think just doing it sounds trite, but it's important. Too many people get hung up on, okay, I need to do this the right way. I have to plan every aspect of this before I actually do it. People are afraid to fail. I think you just have to try it. For example, let's say you have an idea that, I don't know, like I was talking to my friend recently and she hosts Airbnbs. Like she realized that she's very good at doing this. Like she has been doing this for a while. She's figured out how to make a very good second income stream from it. She knows the ins and outs of like what gets high ratings. And she was like, you know what, maybe I should just like make an online course about this. And maybe I could also at the beginning or end of the course link to my referral code so that if new hosts start because of me, I'll get a piece of that. And she was asking me like, well, do you think I should do this or what should I try? And I'm like, just fucking do it. Like you already know, you have the information, you've done the hard part, you've thought about it, you've lived this. Get on Teachable, like just do it. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen is you don't get an audience for it, or maybe you don't get an audience for it at first, but you figure that out later. Like I think it's like the muscle memory of actually doing the thing and not just thinking about it or talking about it, and being willing to take a risk and being willing to fail. And even for like a couple dollars just to start getting a signal about, is this something people will pay for or not? Like throw up a landing page and just get some emails and reach out to those people and do some product exploration.
100%. One of the quotes that changed my life probably 4 years ago was this random anonymous quote I read on Reddit that said, it was something that like, you learn more in 3 days of taking action than in 6 months of researching.
I could not agree more. It's like the just do it attitude.
Yeah. And once you start seeing like the Stripe emails, like, hey, deposit available in your account, that's where the light bulb, like the fire starts for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask people for money. And I understand it. I mean, I'm a VC and an angel investor, so people ask me for money all the time, and I find it hard to do that. You know, whether it's asking a customer to pay you for something, like a lot of people I think have trouble putting value on themselves or the stuff that they put out into the world. And especially it's because, you know, since the 90s, kind of too much has been free. Like we went too far in that direction with the advertising business model and social media and everything. And I think people need to have boundaries and have a sense of self-worth and stand by that. You know, like your time is valuable. You need to stick by it and tell people, learn the value of the word no and figure out how to ask for compensation in a way that's reasonable.
100%. One of the biggest problems, to your point, of people being kind of afraid to ask for money is also when they ask for money, they don't ask for enough. Like they underprice themselves incredibly. I see this all the time with hourly rates where it's like, oh, I'm not worth that much for this, and this reason, where it's like, no, value-based pricing. Like look at what your work is going to accomplish for your client. You should charge for an hourly rate that justifies that.
Exactly. I think the only exception to that is if you're trying to get in the door somewhere where you know that you have a big ability to escalate the amount that you're worth. Like when I applied to that job off Craigslist at that consumer privacy startup, like I had a law degree and I billed myself at $20 an hour. And I later learned that I was by far the cheapest person, but I later got up to a pretty good salary. But I just knew I had to get my foot in the door because I knew I could do a good job at this place. But otherwise, I think you're 100% right with that.
I remember like the moment that I graduated from like low hourly rate to higher to the 6-figure hourly rate, the first moment that happened, I didn't even ask for it. There was a CEO who was kind enough to just say, hey, I want you to ghostwrite for me. You're going to write this article. I'm going to pay you $100 an hour and you're going to start next week. And I was just like, and I was currently making, I think, $55 an hour at that time. So he said that. I was like, yes.
I will be doing that. Yeah. I think it's nice when someone in your life sees the potential in you that you don't even see necessarily. There have been a couple people like that in my life who were instrumental, and it really does change the whole trajectory of your life when someone sees that value in you, because it is tough to put a number on your output or your time. And you are right. People tend to undervalue it, right? It's like it feels egotistical or a little bit icky to put out a number that's very high, but most people just completely undercut it.
I got an interesting question for you. I'm excited for your answer. When founders starts, hey, Mr. Polar Bear.
He's just got business to do over there, you know?
Just got to get on a call.
Yeah.
So this question, what's more important for startups when a founder approaches you or they're making their pitch? Or like if I'm a marketer or an early stage founder, what should I be focusing more on in building my startup? The data and like having accurate data and my systems in place and looking at data to make decisions, or focusing on the story with what I communicate externally, how to, what's the narrative of the brand, the why, the mission? What would you say is more important?
I'd say story. And you're talking about early stage, right?
Early stage.
Yeah. So I definitely would say story, because for early stage, when let's say you're pitching an angel or a VC, that first outreach, the goal shouldn't be, I'm going to walk away from this first outreach with a check. It's almost never going to happen. Like, I mean, it happens for us with angel checks because it's so early and we're expecting to do that. But especially for VCs, the goal should be to get to the next meeting. And the way that you get to the next meeting is by telling a compelling story. And it's a short story. You don't want to lay out all your cards on the table. You want to have some mystique and some intrigue so that the person on the other end of that email is like, huh. You want to invoke FOMO in the person at the other end, so that they're intrigued enough to say, all right, let's do the meeting. I want to hear more about this. So if you put all your cards on the table and you put all your 10-year projections, first of all, nobody fucking knows what they're going to be doing in 10 years, especially an early stage founder. I think that if an investor is asking you for those numbers, they're trolling you, or they don't know what they're doing, because it's just bullshit. Nobody knows. Maybe they want to see you jump through hoops as an exercise, but nobody knows that stuff. The most important stuff is, who are the founders? Why are they here? Why are they motivated? Can this idea be big? That's super important, especially based on the size of the fund. But like, we want to know that you're in this for the right reasons, and that if shit hits the fan, which it will, you're not going to bail immediately. And the other thing I see a lot is founders coming in with basically just an idea or a very early company, and they always say, well, and as a side note, we're collecting all this good data and we'll be able to monetize it later. Like the number of times I've actually seen that happen, probably zero. Everybody thinks that the data they're collecting is some sort of gold mine, but it's often not. Like that's not your product usually. It can be if you're like an API or something, but usually that's not your product, and usually you're overvaluing the value of data when really it should just be like the building blocks. I mean, we're all human, we're all emotional creatures. We all need the story to be compelling, to be invested.
Yeah, makes total sense. You wrote an article for Entrepreneur's Handbook, I think last year, and it was like 10 things that are an instant dequalifier to an investor. And I thought it was a brilliant article. It did well on Medium.
Thanks.
If we were to return to that kind of today, what do you see, or what are those instant dequalifiers that you see from a founder making a pitch?
They're probably still the same. I do remember saying that at the time, I think it was like 2 years ago, remote work was sort of frowned upon, like given the option between two identical companies where one team is in one location and one is remote, it's sort of viewed as a negative for the remote side. But given everything that's happened in the past couple of years with the pandemic, that has definitely changed. And actually, I mean, I'm an introvert. I love working remotely. I love flexibility. So I don't ding founders or teams who do that. But I think some of the more traditional VCs do, because they're creatures of habit, and the patterns that they see of the companies that have worked have mostly been in person. So I guess it's a little bit of a thing to consider, but generally big red flags. Oh God, there's so many. One is just overselling. I really don't react well to, like, there's authentic confidence, and founders kind of need to walk the knife edge between irrational and rational confidence, where that the odds are not good to succeed, but you still have to believe that you're going to beat the odds. But if you're irrational about how you're going to beat the odds, like for example, I have one company that I angel invested in, and I'm not going to name names, but the founder is pretty delusional, and he will send these emails, and they're like these rambling emails about how exceptional they are and how big this is going to be. It's going to be bigger than Google. And he sends them like 3 a.m. Feels like substances might be involved. It's like a pretty grandiose narrative. And it's not intellectually honest, right? Like he doesn't hear feedback. He's not being honest with himself or the investors that this is a difficult thing. I would much prefer somebody to be like, hey, this is going to be hard. Here are all the reasons why it's going to be hard, but here's how I plan to approach them. Like, I don't want people to be delusional about the difficulty and their odds of success, because it's like, then I can't talk to you or help you about that.
Confidence has a limit, or it can be played into too much. Like be self-aware enough to be realistic about what the actual case is.
And an extension of that has to do with competition. So I think as a founder, you should be aware of the competition, but you shouldn't be obsessed with it or mimicking it, because you want to be doing your own thing, but you need to keep an eye on the market. It's important that you just generally know, but don't obsess over it. So I think one extension of that is when you see founders who they won't mention the competition at all. And then you think, did you do your research? Do you even know? Or is this an omission? And then when you do ask them about it, they'll be very dismissive. I'm laughing because I was sort of dismissive of the Enneagram stuff before. But I do think it's good information. I just think the packaging could be improved. So I saw a market for it. However, sometimes you'll see founders where they just sort of like trash and dismiss the competition, even if the competition is someone like Amazon. And it's not a good look. Like, I think founders should have a level of respect for other founders, because it's not easy. And it just looks a little bit rude and kind of delusional. I'd say another thing that is a red flag that might be a little Boston specific, because that's where I'm from, but we have a lot of schools here. You know, we have Harvard, we have MIT, we have like HBS, etc. And you often see these teams of like 5 non-technical founders who kind of all do the same thing, but have given each other executive titles that are not very differentiated. Like you have 5 people in the company, and you have a chief marketing officer, a chief executive officer, a chief operating officer, a brand officer. And it's like, all right, it's a little bit too undifferentiated, and like, who's actually going to build this thing? Yeah. And you should be thinking less about your titles and more about what you uniquely bring to the table. So that's kind of
Hopin is now 700 people and we grew. That's 100 times what we were 18 months ago. And seeing a company, we were 7 people in January 2020. And having seen the company go through this level of growth, to your point about like what titles should early stage founders have, like co-founder and founder, just stick with, you're doing everything at that stage of the game. No need to give you the C-suite comes later, and that like
exactly, like you need that as a gift to give someone, you know, like you understand this as a 3 probably better than anyone. Like a title is free to give away, but extremely valuable often to the person receiving it. And it does a good job of clearing up possible confusion about who do you reach out for what thing and who does what. So early on, there's not really confusion about that. You don't need to do it. Hold on to those titles because they're valuable and they're free to you, the company, to give out. And so it's like you do that and you have nowhere to go from there if you have 7 chief executive whatevers and you haven't even built anything.
Right. And if your company does grow to the level that you hope it does, like globally and ARR, then you're going to need those titles to attract the talent to come in and actually do a good job.
That's where you see like, you know, senior vice president of this, senior special super grand poobah expert of this. And then like, you just keep going.
All right. We're coming up on our time. I have 2 last questions for you that are kind of fun and are dichotomies that founders wrestle with, I'd say. And I'm curious how these hit you. What has served you more in your life, discipline or passion?
Oh, fuck. That is so hard because I am a total hybrid of those 2. Like, I am very impulsive and very driven by what I want, but I'm extremely disciplined. Like, I work out pretty much every day for 36 years. Like, I balance reward and discipline. Like, I don't think you can get anywhere without discipline. So I don't know. I've structured my life to do things that I'm really passionate about. Like, I know this is a hedge, but I really can't pick one because they're both so important. Like, if you just have passion and you don't work hard, I don't think you're going to accomplish anything. But if you just work hard and don't follow your passion, you're just going to end up in a shitty place where you're unhappy.
100%. All right. Next question. Similar question. What's better, obsession or balance? What yields success more?
I think obsession.
Yeah.
I mean, I like every startup that I've worked with that is successful. It's like they have their own form of psychopathy. Like the founders have their own form of psychopathy, and the culture does. And it's like 100% of companies. It's just a question of what is it, and do you fit in well with that brand of crazy? I don't see people being incredibly successful without that level of obsession. It's like we were talking about before, that divide between overconfidence that you're going to succeed as a founder and like delusional, like being confident but not being delusional, right? So yeah, I don't think you can really be casual about it. I mean, this is a game of outliers. Like startups are a game of outliers, and building companies are a game of outliers, and you kind of got to throw yourself to it fully, I think.
Yeah. Sarah, this has been Absolutely phenomenal. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
Me
And
too. This is awesome.
yeah, we should do it again.
For sure.
And what are you doing for the rest? let me just say thank you for your time, and looking forward to next time.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Entrepreneur's Handbook Show. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate a comment below with what your favorite part was. What was a takeaway that you had from this episode with Sarah Downey? And share this around. Also, who should I talk to? Would love any guest recommendations or suggestions. Feel free to shoot me a DM or reach out on Medium. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Cheers.